This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
Place to Be Nation Pop, welcome back. You're hearing us once again on the only comics-centered podcast of Place to Be Nation currently. This is Traders of the Lost Arks. I hope I got the name right this time. We're not workshopping it anymore. That's official now. So, you're hearing this. Hopefully you heard our pilot, and that means that we either got enough listeners or, we all managed to not rage quit the show after our debut episode, that we're back at it again. And we've got another story on offering here. This one was actually picked by, or I would say not so much picked, but championed by Scott Shiflett. So I'll go ahead and bring him in. Scott, how are you on
Tim,
this second edition of our podcast?
I'm glad we are back together on the second episode. We weren't canceled yet. That remains to be seen. At the end of this episode, it might be the series finale, because I feel there's going to be some thoughts on both sides of the spectrum today.
Right, yeah. If the first one didn't do us in, this one might. But here's the thing. We can always, in the grand tradition of comics, say that an ongoing series, in this case a podcast series, if it just doesn't get the downloads that we need, or we all just hate each other at the end of the day, we can always quit after 5 episodes, call it a day, and then retroactively declare it a limited series. That's what you do when a comic doesn't work, or when a podcast doesn't work. But I hear someone chuckling in the background, and I think it's a man we need to make this podcast work. Sean Kidd.
Hello. I am good. I am happy to be here for the second episode, and another comic arc that I have not read. And Scott, thank you for picking this one tonight. And all I'm going to say is, on the last episode, you guys managed, through conversation and dialogue, managed to change my mind. So let's see if we'll be able to do it on this one tonight.
Okay, controversially, we shall see. And last, the man with the plan, the proprietor here of Place to Be Nation Pop, he is Andy Atherton. Andy, are you feeling well? Are you? How's your adventure into comics going? Like, are you more baffled than ever? Are you ready to bail completely after these 2 comic book arcs we have foisted on you?
Well, I think I need. Oh, good evening, gentlemen. By the way, I think I need some good old regular comics suggestions,
some just regular
recommendations to kind of balance it out with kind of the batshit crazy stuff you guys are making me read with no, sense of where everything is coming from. And, truth be told, I do leave my proprietor hat at the door before I walk into the studio to record with you fine gentlemen. But,
okay.
I could just tell you, the bar's set pretty low in terms of download. So I think you're pretty safe, unless you totally crap the bed, which I would put on me to be the one that does it. I think we're good, unless, little self-policing would be the duty of this pod.
Gotcha. Well, if anything, like I said, I think what's going to sink us may be creative differences, but we're gonna try to work through, if not avoid those as much as possiple here.
Even the Beatles broke up at one point, right?
I think we're better than that. I think even through creative differences, we'll be able to make it through it.
Makes it fun. That's why I love doing Pop Goes to the Couch with you guys, because that's what made it fun. It was like we hardly ever all agreed. I mean, there was stuff we all loved to varying degrees, but there were some things that I really love, like Star Wars stuff, and I have a blind spot there a little bit, I will admit. But there are other things like, we didn't all love, or one of us loved, and the other ones were like, what is this bullshit? And that's the way it's going to be here. Who wants to be all happy and merry and cheery? Like, it was great, guys. It was fun. I loved it. No, bullshit. That doesn't make for a fun conversation or a fun podcast. We want to, have some opinions and differing, if that, and maybe like what happened, we're in the Christmas season. The Grinch's heart grew 3 sizes. Sean was convinced on a comics arc that he hated. So, stranger things have happened.
Mm-hmm.
Quite so. Remember Book of Boba Fett and how it really sucked for 2.5 episodes and then it turned into a different show? Anyway.
Remember how it killed Pop Goes to the Couch?
Well, it's neither here nor. I'm going to say Moon Knight killed Pop Goes to the Couch.
Okay,
How about that?
all right, okay.
Yeah, I think, but we still have to make a comeback, or at least special appearances for that podcast.
It will come back. It will come back. I was being funny. I was being totally funny.
We'll see. All right. So I mentioned this, what we're going to be covering today. I don't know. I guess a little peek behind the curtains. The way the show works is the first episode. I think I said asserted my will, forced the panel to read a sentimental, favorite, and ridiculous storyline from my youth. That was my condition for doing the shows, that we start with that. I think we kind of like that format of each person, each host kind of picks something they'd like to cover. We decided maybe to have Schiff next up in the rotation, because I'm afraid that this podcast is going to succeed in nothing but alienating him from ever wanting to read comics again. So wanted him to pick something that maybe he would like and that we were not so familiar with. And I like what he came up with. And in theory, anyway, I like this choice, which is from the series is literally called Superman Batman. It hyphenated, I guess you could say. It's a team-up book from DC, issues 14 through 18. This is a story arc called Absolute Power. Issues cover dated January 2004, cover dated January 2005 through April 2005, but would have been released from like mid-November 2004 to early April 2005. So we're crossing years here. 2 issues shipped in December, I noticed, which was a little unusual, but we can get into that when we talk about this series in the context of sort of where comics were in this period in time. And Sean, you and I have talked about this a little bit. Sean, said you were not reading comics at all during this time period as this would have been coming out. What did you have going on instead?
Well, honestly, at this point in time, I was getting married and was getting ready for the birth of my first son. So comics had taken a back seat, and I was reading big comic events at the time, and I know we'll talk about some of those as we get into what was really out at the time. But so I was really saving it for the big comic events. So when they were coming out, I would read them. But as far as single issues and staying on top of things, I was not really staying on top of comics at this point in time, because unfortunately I should say fortunately, not unfortunately, never really say that. Marriage and children at the time were taking the priority at the time. So yes, I was not reading comics regularly. Correct.
And so nowadays your children and your wife would take a backseat to comics, I take it, right?
Well, no, it's more I have a little bit more time to do some things that I would like to do. Why I deal with the wife and the kids.
Well said for anyone else who might be listening. Schiff, were you reading this? Were you like into comics at this time, or was this kind of too early for you?
No, this was even too early for me. But I think I had watched the X-Men movies at this point. Like that was my only way in with like comic books. Like my little brother was reading comics, but he's mostly a Marvel guy. So like I wasn't even I jumped in with Flashpoint in 2011. So we had to wait a little bit longer for me to join.
Yep. And Andy, I know this is all new to you, but to sort of give you a sense of what else was on newsstands at the time, these were just some items I picked out. If you guys have additions or commentary on any of these, feel free to throw in. So This storyline is being published right on the heels of a big event for Marvel Comics known as Avengers Disassembled, which kind of saw the end and the dissolution of the classic version of the Avengers that we had all known so well since like the 60s. And that series would be rebooted as kind of Marvel's version of the Justice League, in the sense that it was just a collection of all of their most popular solo heroes, whether it made sense for them to be working together or not. That was sort of the conceit behind New Avengers, which started up like right in that January, February timeframe of 2005. And that was by Brian Michael Bendis and David Finch initially. I really hated that series, I'm just going to say. Might be a good idea to cover that first arc at some point, just to, I don't know, I'd be curious to see what my impressions of it would be today, just knowing how much I super hated it at the time. I hated the idea behind it. I hated what it represented. I kind of hated the way that Bendis wrote team books. It was just a real stew of suck for me. But at the same time, you had the solo Avengers heavy hitters like Captain America and Iron Man getting new books spinning out of Avengers Disassembled as well. So that's when we got that Ed Brubaker and Steve Epting Captain America run. This is going to introduce the Winter Soldier / Bucky, like that whole resurrection. A very, very well received creative renaissance on that character. Kind of same story on Iron Man. This is where we get Warren Ellis doing the Bleeding Edge armor, the Extremis story arc, all that stuff. That really kicks off the beginning of Iron Man's. This would have been volumes 4, I think, for Captain America and Iron Man. Cap might have been even deeper in terms of the relaunches, but anyway, that's two very high profile projects from Marvel. You had Astonishing X-Men starting its second story arc titled Danger. There was so Image Comics is kind of limping along, I noticed, during this time period. Like, they're still cranking out material, but it's not a lot of things that you would recognize. There's, for example, a lot of intercompany crossovers. You get a Superman The Darkness miniseries, a Batman Danger Girl one-shot, and a Darkness Tomb Raider one-shot. So I guess that's keeping them afloat. DC, meanwhile, is publishing Detective Comics number 800, big anniversary issue. We're right in the thick of Green Lantern Rebirth, which restores Hal Jordan as the one true Green Lantern after many years on the shelf.
As he should be.
Well, opinions may vary on that. I'm gonna refrain from comments on the Green Lantern stuff, but that was such a point of controversy back then. In the 90s, there was when they replaced Hal Jordan, there was this fan group called it was called Heat, and it stood for, this is so nerdy, Hal's, see if I can get it right, Hal's Emerald Attack Team or something like that. It was basically an organization of fans who were just lobbying DC to bring back Hal Jordan. I mean, for years this went on.
Well, I hated Guy Gardner and his bowl cut. That guy. Do you remember the bowl cut, Gardner?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yes. Awful.
So, man, Green Lantern was kind of a shit show.
And Tim, how far removed are we from Hush? Because that was the big event that I actually did read. How far removed are we at this point from Hush?
I mean, Hush had like just finished up probably the month before the first issue of well, that's not true. I say the first issue of this story arc we're going to be covering, but really the first issue of this Superman Batman series.
Okay. Gotcha.
Because Hush was published in like 2002, 2003. This Superman Batman series starts in like late 2003.
So Hush was the last DC like story arc that I read before this.
That you had read.
Yeah, I had read. Yep. Okay.
We get another big anniversary issue in Nightwing number 100. Good old Dick Grayson there, making it 100 issues. This was later than I thought, but apparently Ultimates Volume 2 just kicked off. That second volume, yeah. And that's Mark Miller, Brian Hitch, still, keeping the dream alive for the Ultimates.
I did read the Ultimates. I dug the Ultimates. Yeah. Yep.
I remember the Ultimates being like the book that thought it was cooler than every other, because it like came out when it wanted to. Like I say that like it was up to the comic itself and not the lazy ass creators. But no, it was like it would just come out whenever, and it would be like when people complained, Mark Miller would be like, "Well, sit down and shut the fuck up. You like the comic, don't you? It'll come out when it comes out."
So it's like the Orange Cassidy of comics.
A little bit, yeah.
And Tim, I also didn't realize this is around the time that X-23 got their first series too.
Yes, so
I had no idea. That's so long ago.
I know, it really is. So that's the X-23, the female teenage clone of Wolverine. Kind of a lot going on there.
Yeah.
Apparently a character who debuted in other media. She was from that X-Men Evolution series. I never really watched that. I watched the original X-Men animated series. But that's where she first appeared, and they brought her into the comics with this miniseries, yes, which is actually pretty good. I remember at the time reading that as it came out. It was pretty well done for, again, a pretty out there concept. And a character that's, still around today and pretty popular. A lot of X-Men stuff. Yep.
One that pops out at me as you're going through it. I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but
no, please.
The Pulse, the really bad spinoff of Alias.
Oh yeah,
yeah. So that one caught my eyes. I'm looking through this too.
Yeah, that was kind of the. So Alias was more a mature reader's title, as we know. The Pulse was meant to be a little bit more accessible, a little bit more baked into the mainstream Marvel universe, not so much the dark and ugly corners of the Marvel universe. So I understood that in theory, but it did definitely feel like a watered down version of Alias.
Yeah.
And it didn't last very long either.
Yep.
You've got Dan Slott's Spider-Man Human Torch miniseries, which was very popular at the time and probably helped him get the gig on Spider-Man eventually. Mm-hmm. He was also writing that She-Hulk solo series at this point, which the Disney Plus show borrowed pretty liberally from. The one-shot Joker, the Man Who Laughs, which was kind of like an oversized graphic novel. Marvel didn't do too many of these, but that was a DC thing that was pretty popular. New Black Panther series from Reginald Hudlin and John Romita Jr. This was controversial because it replaced the Christopher Priest Black Panther series, which was like kind of a cult favorite among fans. Never a big seller, but you would just hear people talking about it. Like it was one of those best kept secrets, it seemed like, of Marvel Comics. Young Avengers and Runaways both debuting kind of towards the end of our run here. I didn't realize they hit both in the same month.
Runaways is a lot of fun. I read that first later on in life, like a couple years ago, and the first 20 issues it's great stuff.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of at least the early Runaways by Brian K. Vaughan. Joss Whedon actually wrote several issues of that just sort of flew completely under the radar. That first volume of Young Avengers is really good too, but that's how far back that team and concept goes. And finally, I have down Seven Soldiers, issue 0. This is Grant Morrison's sort of reinterpretation of a lot of the Fourth World characters. So a lot of the Jack Kirby, Apocalypse and Orion and Darkseid, all those type characters would get a relaunch through a series of mini series that kicked off in this little one shot. And that sort of leads into, I think, Final Crisis, which, I mean, we haven't even, I guess we've done at this point, Identity Crisis, right? That was the summer of 2004, DC event. It's actually just wrapping up, and we're heading into Infinite. It's always a crisis with DC, right? So we're heading into Infinite Crisis, which is sort of what got me back into DC Comics, if you can believe it or not.
And Tim, this leading up to Infinite Crisis is the reason why I originally came across this story arc, because as you guys are aware, I'm reading all these crazy DC and Marvel events basically to catch up for lost time. But the listeners may not know this, and you gave me this website, which is very great, called comicbookreadingorders.com. Now, they had an event, which I thought was an official event, but the DC app didn't have it, so I literally copied and pasted all of the comics that were in this page and put it into a notepad so I can mark off each one I was done. This was called Countdown to Infinite Crisis. It spanned 200 issues, because it basically sets the stage for all of this. And this is how I came across this story arc. And I actually remember messaging you guys in our little group chat and was saying how, oh my God, you guys should check this out. And then when we were doing the pitch for this, I was like, well, this will be the first one that I do. So this is how I came across it for the first time, because I read this for the first time earlier this year in 2022. And I was just blown away with how much I loved it. Spoiler alert, guys. Yes, I chose it, and I love the story. So it might be a little bit of a shock there. But no, that's how I was just, it's not like I just found it because it was on the list to read for Countdown to Infinite Crisis.
Yeah, and well, I'm glad that sort of the Countdown to Infinite Crisis tie-in stuff is out there, even though it was never labeled as such by the publisher. Part of the reason for that is they were really cagey about even the title Infinite Crisis for a long time. I remember they made it known that they were going to do a big summer crossover, the type of crossover they hadn't done in many years, by publishing this one shot it was literally just called Countdown. And that's how it was solicited, and I think it was just a freebie, or at least it was given to me free by my local comic shop owner. I don't know that it was actually free. I think he just thought I might enjoy it and thought it might get me into DC Comics, and tossed it in my my pull bin. So I went ahead and read it, and it was just all of this setup for the various limited series, leading into what would then be known as Infinite Crisis. And that's where it was actually revealed that the event would be called Infinite Crisis. The one shot itself was called Countdown to Infinite Crisis. And so people didn't know that until they picked it up on stands that day and were like, oh, this is okay, it's going to be an actual crisis, which that branding means something if you're a DC Comics fan. So that let people know, that kind of put people on notice that this was going to be a big deal. But they were sort of secretive about what projects, what miniseries, what characters even would be involved, and to what extent. So there wasn't this big marketing push to make people buy all this stuff. until the cat was out of the bag, and they let it be known that this was all leading up to Infinite Crisis, and they got a little bit better about telling you what was important and what to follow. But yeah, there's a lot of secrecy behind that initially. I remember, but it's good that, I mean, God, 200 some odd comics that you probably, like, regular readers were probably just going about their daily or their monthly buying habits, not knowing that this was all headed somewhere. This was all connected and was going to be paid off in a big way.
Yeah, like it, like, since I knew it was leading to it, like, you would see the breadcrumbs a little bit, like all these things starting to happen, like the Thawne Rangarian War, like that starts up, and that's a big part in Infinite Crisis as well. But like then you see, like, there was like other ones that I read, like Manhunter, which is actually a pretty interesting concept, which we may go back to for a later arc, but not for a little while. I think I'm gonna go Marvel my next one. But just seeing all the breadcrumbs and how, like, they constantly talk about, I know we're getting ahead of ourselves talking about Infinite Crisis. They talk about how bad the DC Earth 1 world is, and how, like, everything's going to hell, with the culminating with, like, the Omax and, Diana Wonder Woman killing Maxwell Lord, and then it being broadcast on TV, which I think it being broadcast on TV after he died, that's sort of like how in Spider-Man, the second Spider-Man of this new trilogy, how Mysterio broadcast it everywhere to make it look like Spider-Man killed him. And, like, after reading that, I was like, damn, did they steal that? And it kind of feels like they did, to be honest.
Well, and it's like they conveniently leave out the part where Maxwell Lord blows out Blue Beetle's brains.
Yes,
kills that on live television.
Yeah, kills Blue Beetle, sadly. Who was, like, everyone, which it's the start of it's amazing. Like, everyone's dismissive of Blue Beetle, but he was right all along. And then at the end of the episode, he's shot by, which I always knew Maxwell Lord was a bad guy. I didn't realize he had a little bit of a babyface turn. And, like, he was a quasi babyface at the time.
Yeah,
so
in the 80s, yeah, I mean, that was, I remember reading all that in, like I said, Countdown, and that's what brought me back into the fold. So DC is really fired on all cylinders at this point. And this Superman-Batman series, I mean, we're still pretty early in the run of this book, but that was, like, I remember when it started, it was this like blockbuster prestige series that started in 2003, and it combined these flagship characters under one regular ongoing book. And so that was a reunion not only of Batman and Superman, but this all-star creative team, which was writer Jeff Loeb and artist Ed McGuinness. So they had a pretty lengthy run on the regular Superman book from, like, 2000 to 2002. But Loeb made a lot of sense as the writer for this series. Like, he had like proven his chops as a writer on both of these characters. So beyond that, like, Superman run that I mentioned, he had done, obviously, Hush, which we talked about. Everyone knows Hush, but going back even further, Batman: The Long Halloween, the sequel to that, Dark Victory. So he's known as a Batman writer as much as he is a Superman writer, really. And I mean, his association with Superman goes back to the late 90s with Superman for All Seasons, a very, very well-received, critically acclaimed miniseries that was kind of a back to basics for Superman after a series of, strange gimmicks in the 90s.
Well, and he also wrote TV shows too, right, Tim?
And he had dabbled in TV and film. Like, I want to say he was
Commando.
Like a screenwriter for Commando or something. So yeah,
Did Lost, did Smallville, Teen Wolf, wrote for Heroes, the TV show too.
Wrote for the S.
Yeah.
So
hopefully season 1 and not anything else.
I was going to say, yeah.
A lot of credits to his
good
name.
writer. Good writer.
Just can I ask a question?
Go ahead. Yep. Please.
Well, just so I have context. So I have context. How many new issues? Now I know there are so many different publishers and characters, but like just say Marvel and DC, like on a weekly or a monthly basis, how many new comics are released?
A lot.
like I would like if you're well if like say Tim, Sean, like you guys are comic guys, okay, it's whatever comics get released, when do they get dropped, like Sundays, Mondays, wherever it is. How many comics are you generally getting like that you may want to read in a given week that's new?
So for me, I was a monthly. There were people who would go to the comic stores weekly to pick up their books that they wanted, because Wednesdays are New Comics Day. So most months have 4 Wednesdays, so that's 4 days in a month you're going to get new comics. Some people would go every single week. Me, I was just more every month, excuse me. And I was primarily a Marvel reader. Marvel was, compared to today, they were cranking out a lot more than their output nowadays, I feel like. Just looking at some of these newsstand listings, there is such a glut of like X-Men stuff that a lot of it is mini-series, a lot of it is like one-shots. But I'm seeing stuff like Gambit had a solo series, Rogue had a solo series, Nightcrawler had. These would last like for 12 issues at best and then get canceled. There's like an Alpha Flight. There's just so much crap I didn't even mention. So, we're talking anywhere from like regular ongoing publications. I would say, for Marvel and DC, 40 to 60
a week.
No, not a week. Monthly. More like a month.
All right.
But I would tell you, for me, per week, I would say on a monthly basis, I was probably reading anywhere from 15 to 20 comics a month.
Wow.
Yeah. It would be a lot more for me, just total, right? When you factor in all the, there'd always be some event comic, and there's always like a bunch of issues of something I wouldn't normally read.
Yeah, well, I meant regularly, like subscription, like regular comics, but when you add the events comic, it was a lot more than that, but I'm talking like regular series.
Yeah, regular
anywhere
series.
15 to 20, but yeah, it was a lot more than that when they would do like Executioner's Song and all these big events. Mm-hmm. It really got out of control for a while.
Yeah, it was probably about, to estimate, like, let's say I was a big X-Men guy, so like 10, as many as 10 regular X-Men books a month. Yeah. All the Avengers stuff, so that's like an additional, that'll take you to about 16, 18 right there. I was also into Spider-Man, that's like at least 4, so we're in the 20s. Stuff like, I was even reading Fantastic Four,
Oh, God, I'm sorry.
Well, Mark Waid was writing it, and it was really good at the time. It actually was. I would say for me, it would be 30 would not be an unreasonable number. Yeah. A month of just regular monthly titles, I would have been. And that's just Marvel, really. God. Yeah. Then I got into DC, and it just got to be way, way too much. But anyway, yeah, good question.
Yeah, I just want to kind of get and like kind of learn where you guys are coming from, like how much, you're ingesting, in terms of comics and all the things you as guys who have read comics for a very long time and keeping it all straight and remembering all this stuff. Like y'all know, like my memory is for shit, and I can barely keep, the cartoons I've watched and stuff like that. Like how like I know Disney inwards and outwards is like how you guys know comics. So I'm trying to like relate to like how much you're, reading a month as opposed to like what I was watching and reading like the histories of like characters.
Like for me early on, like and again, I know we're getting off topic a little bit. For like,
we'll get to it.
For the '80s when I was younger, like the '90s, it really bloomed up. Like in the '80s, for example, like for me, it was like Spider-Man. Like you had all like single series, right? So it was Spider-Man, it was X-Men, it was Avengers, and so the amount of comics you got were a lot less until then they started blasting them off. Like X-Men had multiple X-Men.
There weren't as many spin-offs back then. There weren't as many derivative titles. There weren't as many, like, there's no logical reason for there to be 2 X-Men titles, right? But
then they got new
money.
Then I started reading.
Yeah, they're gonna sell twice as many, so of course it's gonna be a thing, right?
And then Power Pack. Then they had a Power Pack, and I did Power Pack.
Yeah.
It ballooned as time went on. So yeah. Yeah.
There used to be a lot, and when there were spin-offs, there used to be a lot more differentiation. Like, New Mutants was a spin-off of X-Men, but it was nothing like.
And it was so good and so
X-Men.
different. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, X Factor was nothing like the main X-Men book. So yeah,
Andy,
it was 90s, different.
The '90s, it got nuts. It got nuts.
It almost killed comics.
Yeah, almost. Yeah, we talked about that on the last episode. The '90s almost killed it.
Yeah.
All right.
So we're talking about Superman, Batman, just in general here. This series. Jeff Loeb is going to be the writer.
Yep. Tim, isn't this also? I mean, I believe there was another series, World's Finest. Wasn't there a team book with them like in the past too?
There was. Yeah. And that's the thing. Like this is happening because DC is sort of getting pulled in multiple different directions. Both, and there's a real meta element to this too, right? Scott mentioned how within the books, the stories are kind of getting darker and darker. It's like that grim and gritty. Everything has to be like a deconstruction of classic, superheroes, and it has to feel like it could happen in the real world. And these aren't for kids anymore. That whole thing, and that's sort of. It's now being remarked upon within the stories themselves. Well, characters are saying there's something wrong with this world, right? Like things are way worse than they've ever been, and we have to do something about it. And that very, again, meta factor is sort of what Infinite Crisis is going to be built upon. And so with this Superman Batman book, yes, it's following in the heels of World's Finest, that very pre-crisis, and when I say pre-crisis, I mean pre-Infinite Crisis from the 80s, which consolidated all of DC's multiverse, all their characters, all their different versions of every characters, and streamlined everything, right? That's where we are. But World's Finest was this very pre-crisis idea that Superman and Batman are best buddies and hang out all the time and have adventures together and get along really well.
And I used to read that one back in the old days, like when it was like just a fun team-up book with really no real context to it, except that they
kind of the Super Friends. Yeah, it's very kind of dippy, kind of simplistic, one and done. Stories, sort of the Super Friends versions of these characters.
Kind of like Marvel Team Up, where Spider-Man teamed up with random, except this was the two main people in DC. So
Yep. And so in the post-crisis world of DC Comics, Superman and Batman had a much more adversarial relationship. Like they had been teammates on the Justice League, but that wasn't a very team-centered comic. It was more of a big plots, big ideas comic. And it also had the advantage of other characters that they can interact with. So on a one-on-one basis, Superman and Batman were not very tight, and so this kind of this series in a way gets them back to a place where they are a bit more cooperative, working together rather than. Having these different philosophies towards crime fighting and, at each other's throats as much as they're at each other's sides. And that was sort of this, this it was Bronze Age, 70s, 80s revivalist movement that was going on creatively, where a lot of these creators who grew up reading and loving those comics wanted to bring them back and wanted to bring that style back. And I think you see that with guys like Mark Waid, who, I mean, I think is a brilliant superhero writer. You really see it with Jeff Loeb as well, in the start of this series. You know, Superman and Batman together again, made a lot of people happy. And it made DC a lot of money also. So that's where we also get the original artist for this book, Ed McGuinness, who, he's not the illustrator of what we're going to be covering, but that just gives you an idea of how important this series was to DC at the time. It was going to be iconic, these two iconic flagship characters in Superman and Batman, with an all-star creative team, Jeff Loeb and whatever, some superstar artist. McGuinness does like the first 6 issues. Then Michael Turner, who was a very popular artist at the time, does the next arc. Here we're getting Carlos Pacheco. So I really love Carlos Pacheco. Sean, I don't know, have we talked about Pacheco? Like, I know he came in sort of the mid-90s at Marvel. Were you a big Carlos Pacheco fan, like on his X-Men or any of his other Marvel stuff, like Avengers?
I don't think we've really talked about him, like in any of our chats or anything, like too in depth, to be honest with you.
Yeah, he's just to get into him a little bit, because he is the artist for the entirety of these 5 issues. So yeah, came into Marvel in the mid 90s. He's a Spanish artist, so he's got this kind of European style, but it's with enough flash and, I don't know, panache that can really appeal to more American readers. So he's rare in that regard. You don't see a lot of European artists make the kind of impact that he has in his career. So doing various X-Men related books, eventually got the call up to one of the main X-Men series.
He did Avengers Forever, didn't he?
He did Avengers Forever, 12 issues with Kurt Busiek, longtime collaborator of Kurt Busiek's. I mean, I don't personally love that storyline. It's kind of similar to what we're. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of similar to what we're going to be talking about, in the way it's like got a lot of time travel, and it does a lot of retconning. Like it's all over the place. He also, I know you'll love this, Sean. Pacheco had a run on Fantastic Four as well, as artist, which some of those issues are decent. But that's where he first worked with Jeff Loeb, who wrote some of that stuff also. First work for DC was an oversized original graphic novel called JLA JSA Virtue and Vice. Again, this was the type of thing that DC would do that Marvel tended not to. It was like a 96-page Justice League JSA team up. I've never read it, but I kind of want to, just because it sounds like something that I would enjoy. Mm-hmm. Does a little creator-owned book called Aerosmith, that again is with Kurt Busiek, and that's what leads him to this series, Superman Batman, with Jeff Loeb, doing these 5 issues. So he's one of those artists, he never had a long run on any one book, but when you saw his name, it was like, oh, this is a big deal, because they wouldn't be trotting out this guy for just any old shit that they're throwing out there. At least that's how I've always interpreted, any project with Carlos Pacheco's name on the byline. He's been a big deal artist for me. I don't know that everyone would necessarily say the same. And I bring him up only to say that in some ways it's appropriate that we're covering this story when we are. He recently passed away, just last month, in fact, November 9th. due to complications from ALS, which he announced he was diagnosed with that just 2 months prior to his death in September. So kind of a tragic and an abrupt end to his life and his career, but leaves behind a prolific body of work across a variety of publishers and characters. I mean, if you were to think of any one character that he's associated with, I kind of think of that as being Superman, just because he did have a Superman run later on. Again, with Kurt Busiek, I mean, they were kind of a superstar writer-artist tandem of their own. But yeah, his defining work, I mean, probably is Avengers Forever. So that may deserve a revisit someday. But I just wanted to give some background on the artist of this arc and pay a little tribute to him. I think it's worthwhile.
I think the art of it is not. I think the art's actually very well done. I mean, I know we'll get into it, but the art I didn't mind at all. So
okay. Yeah. So with that said, let's break it down. We've got, again, Superman, Batman, numbers 14 through 18, your creative team. Writer Jeff Loeb, penciler Carlos Pacheco, inker Jesus Marino, letterer Richard Starkings, colorist Laura Martin, edited by Eddie Berganza. This is consistent for all 5 issues, so rock solid there.
No weird editorial change like we saw at the end of Capwolf.
No midstream editorial change. Yeah, I don't know what happened there.
No Ralph Macchio.
No Ralph Macchio, no Karate Kid, except in the Legion. Now the Legion has a Karate Kid, and they're a part of this story. But at this point, I don't know. Schiff, I want to kick it over to you a little bit and ask, when did you, or what drew you to this story? What do you love so much about it? What made you think it'd be a good pick for our podcast? And then we'll dive into our feelings on it.
What drew me is I'm a big fan of like alternate realities, what ifs, like just a little spin on things, That's why I want to say it's Earth 3 or 4 where like the Justice League are the bad guys. I've always been like
the Injustice Society.
Yes, the Injustice Society with like Owlman and all those. But I remember reading this for the first time and being like blown away with it, and like because it was just like hitting all the stuff that I really liked, and it was very interesting to me. And it made me want to go back and read the whole thing, but like I said, I'm on my own little mission right now because it reminded me of the Supernatural episodes. I watched that TV show where the Angels, this was in season 4 or 5, wipe the minds of Dean and Sam, and they still end up doing the same thing that they always did. It's like they're predestined to be these characters. And this is sort of like that as well. Like, we see like in the first 2 issues, we see Superman and Batman are straight up killers. Like,
yeah,
we see them kill, Oliver Queen, Wonder Woman, a bunch of C and D list characters I don't really care about. But we see that then they find out that, and we actually in the middle of this, we see Batman kill Joe Chill with a gun. And seeing Batman with a gun is always jarring. I know they went away from that. And, that was one of the big issues with Zack Snyder's thing was like, Batman was killing people, but seeing him kill someone and then just fade from existence was jarring to say the least. And it just seemed like every comic book issue, which they're supposed to do this because basically, we're all wrestling fans here except him. But wrestling is just like, they always call it like a male soap opera. I wouldn't even say the male part. It's just a soap opera. It's supposed to keep us coming week after week back, like a soap opera would. And that's what comics is as well. You get to the last page, something new pops up. And I was getting to to the last page, swipe it on the DC Infinite app, and I would just like read next issue. And I think I read this in like 2 sittings. And not to get too gross, one of the sittings was on the toilet, so I just lost track of time.
Wow. Okay.
But it just like I loved it. I know Sean has an issue with Uncle Sam. He's killed off in the second issue because he becomes Green Lantern Uncle Sam. Wonder Woman's
got issues with him too.
Wonder Woman. Sorry, I'm jumping around. Wonder Woman's head was snapped with the lasso of truth by Superman in a pretty gnarly, like artistic looking shot when you see it. And then at the very end, like we see that like the whole time, like Superman and Batman, like they're like we're brothers, and we see that their bond is really strong. Where like when they're going through these different timelines because time's starting to collapse on itself, which I could understand how that gets a little like what the fuck are we doing? But with the time collapsing on itself, we always see like every time one of them dies, there's like standing up for the other one. And even at the very end, where the main bad guy is Ra's al Ghul, Superman takes a kryptonite sword in the chest to save Batman so he doesn't die. And Tim, I know I'm going to catch up. You're going to give me shit on this. I know everyone's like calling Superman is like he is the DC prime hero. To me, that's Batman, and it really shows in the story that without Batman, everything falls apart. I mean, hell, we see that Ra's al Ghul wiped out the whole Justice League because Batman wasn't there to save them, and they take them to the Lazarus pits. Martian Manhunter, Flash, Hal Jordan, Green Lantern. I feel like I'm missing someone, but they take him down, and we have like this nice like quasi Justice Aquaman. Yes, we have this like big battle where even Batman's like, I'm gonna be responsible for these deaths, and he's like, they won't matter, but I'll still remember it. And that's pretty deep. It shows like the issues that these men will have to go through. Yes, it never existed, but it existed to them only. And Superman says he'll have to reach out to Bruce later and talk to him, because when they fix the timeline, Superman's with Lois having his love life, and Bruce is talking to Alfred, and Alfred said, you said something about wanting to start taking to swim at night, and because that's what Bruce famously did when he had his parents and he was happy. And that's what, and I'm sorry, I'm going all over the place, guys. And Superman's like, I can't believe I took happiness away from Bruce. I've never seen that before. And Bruce to have that just so very little, and then it's back to Bruce being like, the crime fighting sad person that we know, who makes his own family when he loses his own. And this was around the time, like I said, I read them all, that Batman had broken away from Oracle. He was no longer using Oracle. Red Hood was about to return and throw a wrench into things. So like Bruce is going through all this, and it's just like heartbreaking. And also one thing that I did love is that it shows that Selena Kyle is Bruce's one true love, because they're Bruce and Superman's quote unquote parents here. They always they brought Lois Lane for Superman because we know that, but then we always see in different timelines Selena Kyle and Bruce together. In the timeline where they're the kings of the world, they're together. When Bruce is happy, he's like, "Oh, I think I'm going to call Selena Kyle tonight." And I don't know, I just loved it. And I'm sure we'll have our issues. It would be a boring ass podcast if we didn't. But Sean, you're up, buddy.
Why am I up?
Well, you don't have to be, but
no. Tim's the host. Tim, do you want me to go, or would you like to go to Andy next? I would like to hear Andy's perspective personally, because
Sure, why not?
Yeah.
I think what you're hitting on, Schiff, are definitely the positives that I took away from this. Also, just the character work is all really strong. But I'll say my piece on that. Andy, you read this.
Yeah.
This, I would say, Andy, is a bit more representative of what now it's got a lot of plot elements that are difficult to follow in terms of like the time travel and stuff like that. But in terms of what comics are generally like, especially at this time period, 2005. And even today, I mean, I think this reads more like a modern comic than certainly the Capwolf saga. But this is sort of like more representative of what modern comics are like. So with that in mind, Andy, are you like, oh, you shouldn't have told me that?
Well, I mean, look, I know they're all going to be different, and there's different styles, so I have to get used to it, on figuring out like, okay, this is Batman's inner monologue, this is Superman's inner monologue, and this is how we're following it. And also for me, just personally, reading it on DC, Infinite, whatever it is, I had to keep turning my iPad because it was annoying because of like reading the lettering was so small. So that was it. I was tired. Maybe I'll go back and read it again, afterwards to kind of after I hear what everybody's saying. I mean, I know my frame of reference for these characters, like I've said, is the cartoons growing up, and for me, Batman was always the brains and Superman was the brawn to kind of drill it all the way down, of the Super Friends. And then you had the other characters like, had their roles, but that was really what it came down to. And seeing them together, I'm cool with, but just, and I understand where Shift's going with like the what ifs, because I've seen what ifs in plenty of other different things. Like one of my favorite Buffy the Vampire Slayer episodes is the what if Buffy never came to Sunnydale, what if Sunnydale, whatever it's called. And, and Willow and Xander are all vampires. And I think that is such a smart, fun episode. But in here, yeah, for me, like if I'm going to like comics college right now, I'm still in the 100s. This is like a 300 level comic for me. Like I didn't know a lot of the players going in. I was like, oh, cool. Like Green Arrow's in this. Nope, not really. And Aquaman and Flash. Nope. They give it and they take it like right away. Yeah. And I'm like, Uncle Sam. Who the hell is Uncle Sam? Like I have no recollection of ever knowing of an Uncle Sam character. It took a lot for me to like follow and buy in, just because of my lack of comics knowledge and the lack of runs and things like that. I understand them being like a one-off, but for me, just the way these parents, this trio, no clue who they were. I was trying to follow along, like what each of their specific powers were.
Andy, you've never heard of Lightning Lord or Saturn Queen? I don't understand.
I'm gonna say I may have been sick that day. That was covered in comics class, but yeah, it was a little difficult to follow for me at times, and I'm gonna chalk that up like literally just because it's only my second arc I've ever read, But I'm all for these stories because there's only so many stories you can tell out there. Let's, like I mentioned before, we said like there are arcs like I've heard of that I would love to read, that like Red Sun, like what if Superman, landed in Russia, right? And I would read that. I'd want to check that out. But the kind of, I don't know, maybe just not knowing the character all that well, being prepared for what these characters did in order to keep their way of life going. Superman like killing people, just flat out murdering and things like that. I know they're like the evil versions, and there was an episode of Super Friends where the Super Friends were evil in one world and the Supermans got swapped out. So I do kind of get that, our heroes can be villains. It's like anything. It's like if you follow a character in a story, you're going to be on their side. And in this one, we're made to kind of reverse like how we think about them. Like if you watch Walking Dead from the beginning and we followed Negan, Rick's the bad guy. It's like, it's how in the narrative is framed. But for me, it was just one, it was confusing in the time and all that stuff and trying to do the fixing. But it was, I guess for me to kind of get with the picture, so to speak, I think I've had to have read some more comics. I'm not saying like I don't want to do things like this in the future for the pod. Like I'll read anything you guys put in front of me, but it's going to definitely require me to do reread it one more just to kind of understand the points that are being made, because I didn't really understand some of it. I thought it was beautifully drawn. I thought,
I'm glad you said that, at least.
Yeah.
I wondered how the art hit with you.
I appreciate the art. I do.
I'm a big Pacheco mark, and I wonder if that's just a personal thing or if other people respond to strong.
The art is fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, I was watching some video for the Video Jukebox Song of the Day, and I'm like, this is a cheesy video, but it was framed really well. Like, I can appreciate like when something is, the art is there, and I did appreciate that of it. It was drawn very well. For me, it was just a little too much for me, I think. That's all.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying, and I think something about, and Sean, I'm sure you'll have more to say on this, but what often gives me pause, I'll say, when I read a DC comic is a character will appear kind of abruptly and seem important to the story without a lot in the way of background or introduction. And I'll find myself going, why am I confused right now? And then I'll go, oh, because it's a DC comic and every character, no matter how major or minor, tends to be a callback or some kind of reference to a character from the past because they have such a long, sprawling publication history. They've collapsed their own continuity many times over. Not as many times over at this point in time in 2005 as they have today. But, we've been through Crisis on Infinite Earths. We're heading up on Infinite Crisis, and you'll get these character introductions, and it's like, oh, this is a reference to something from a pre-Crisis story, a Legion story, old Superman comics, whatever it is. That here I go on Wikipedia having to look this up, right? And that's a little bit annoying. And I think it's something that DC writers just can't resist. They just can't stop themselves from putting these little references and Easter eggs in the stories to kind of maybe pop themselves to the detriment of maybe the reading comprehension. And boy, do we see a lot of that with some of this. Like, I mean, it's almost a tour of the DC universe in a lot of ways with all the time jumping and stuff. We get Commandy, the last boy on Earth, which is a whole separate thing onto itself.
Forget Jonah Hex and Scalp Hunter.
Oh my God!
I heard of Jonah Hex.
From Jonah Hex and all the Western heroes.
Yes.
Uncle Sam and the Freedom Fighters. Like, and a lot of these aren't even original DC creations. They're from other publishers that were acquired by DC at certain points along the way. And so again, it's just sort of, and I kind of enjoy like seeing, especially again, Pacheco draw all these different characters and cool concepts. But do they all fit together very well? No. Do they have to be here? Do they get a lot of breathing space? Not really. In some ways, I think this may sound, I don't know, condescending, but in some ways, I think this story would work better as a video game than as a comic, because it's like it really does give you a lot of side quests and mid boss battles and stuff like that, while telling a concrete story, but like as five issues of a monthly comic series, it's a little bit overwhelming, and I don't know that any one idea here gets enough space to breathe and to leave me with any sort of real impact. It's kind of like one thing happens, then another, then another, then another, and I'm like, wait, I'm still 3 pages ago, right? And I mean, there's nothing wrong with comics going that big. It's just when it's done at the expense of your ability to really follow and keep up with what the plot is demanding. I think that's where it starts to lose me a bit. Sean, that was my more probably diplomatic take. I think you may have stronger words on the subject.
I think I can be diplomatic. Let me tell you what I do like. The art I thought was awesome. Like, comparable to Capwolf, it's not even close. Let's be honest.
Oh my God, this is.
I mean, it's like above and beyond. Like, it's
we're playing pickup sticks with Capwolf.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. I mean, the art is stunning. I mean, you take a character like Uncle Sam and you make him like that one scene where he's like up in the air with the freaking ring. Like, whoever is going to draw Uncle Sam like that, right? I mean, it's just
looks so majestic.
Yeah, like it's so. I can't say enough about the art. So I'm glad you brought up Pacheco because you gave him the just due you should, and this really does make him shine in terms of what he brings to the table. So it's really, really beautifully drawn. I also, coming into this, the story premise around Superman having the absolute power and just the theory of what it could be if that's really what it was that he had. I mean, he is this alien has unlimited power, and what he could do with that is a scary premise. And so the premise,
and he wasn't raised with the Midwestern values of the Kents. He was raised as this. Yeah. So the premise itself is amazing and something that written really well.
Sorry, Sean. One of my favorite lines is when Ollie calls Batman and Superman the Hitler twins.
Yeah, Hitlers,
yes. But so the theory and the premise of this story, I was all in on. It's like, great, this could be a great story to really catch me and get me in because it makes sense to me. Fundamentally, I had problems with Batman being part of this because Batman doesn't strike me as someone to have absolute power in this regime based on who Superman is. But one thing that has talked me through this, that has happened in this pod that has changed my mindset a little bit, similar to Capwolf, is Batman and Superman are DC-centric. They are your two prime heroes in this universe. So it makes sense for Batman and Superman to be a part of this story. I have changed my mind on that based on how I earlier thought. What I also liked at the end of this is, and Schiff brought it up, I do like that we saw Batman happy. We saw Batman with his parents. We saw... I think there's consequences to how this story played out for Batman and Superman both. I like the consequence of that. What I don't like is going back to how it all played out. I think it was very convoluted getting to the end game of this story. I think the villains are freaking super ass cheesy. Like, it makes me want to go back to like Super Friends, like Lightning Lord, Saturn Queen. Why don't you just have the freaking Justice, go back to, why don't we just have Luthor and Cheetah and all these other freaking generic ones that we had on Legion of the Super Friends when we did that whole cartoon
Legion
series?
of Doom.
Hey, I that's my jam, man.
No, I get it, but you know what? We might as well have had Legion of Doom be the freaking villains because these freaking jamokes, whoever they were, I gave no shit about. And the fact that they dictated the future of Batman and Superman to me was a joke, like just a joke to me because I didn't care who they were. And to your point, Tim, they just inserted these villains with no backstory whatsoever that maybe give no shit about them whatsoever. Like, oh, here they are. They dictated the future of the two biggest heroes that are now the villains, and it just made no sense. Can
I add some color to?
Yes, go ahead.
Some annotations to that, perhaps.
Yes.
And I fully share your frustration because that's a prime example of what I'm talking about, where they just sort of insert these characters that have a lot of importance to the story and to the plot, and yet you're like, why? And like, why are they so lame? And what I realized is that these three characters are modeled after the three original Legionnaires who debuted in like Superboy comics in the 1950s. Okay,
but we don't care, and we don't know that. As readers, but no history, like Andy has no clue about that, and honestly, neither do I.
They don't care about readers like Andy. They don't care about readers like us who have never read 1950s Superboy. This is my problem with DC, when they do stuff like this. At the same time, if it was Marvel, you and I, if they did stuff like this, you and I would be eating it up probably. But
and that makes sense. I got what you're saying about that.
But I don't think that in either case, like I don't think either publisher should indulge in that sort of thing, right? Because it's very inaccessible to new readers. It's the type of thing that makes comics just seem like they're about other comics, right? It's like no comic can just be read in a vacuum. You have to read this comic that's referenced in this comic that's referenced in this comic. Like it's just, it's kind of this, it makes it this big house of cards that is impossible to get into, I feel like. But these three characters are patterned after, bear with me, Lightning Lad, Cosmic Boy, and Saturn Girl.
I know who all those are, believe it or not. But I don't care about them as characters either. So
sure, but that's why they're doing it, is because they're the three original Legionnaires who Superboy met when they were time traveling, and that's what led to all the other Legion characters coming into the present, and Superboy joining the Legion and all that shit, right? And it's like, okay, this is putting sort of a perverse spin on that, where it said, what if these guys, these time travelers from the 31st century had ill intent and actually corrupted our heroes? And so it's just like a kind of variance on these characters. And if you aren't familiar with that backstory, if you aren't familiar with the significance of those three specific characters to the history of DC Comics, then it's not going to mean anything, right? It's just going to be like, who are these three randos?
Yeah. And
so yeah,
I get it. And I also, listen, the Green Arrow scene was great. The Wonder Woman scene was great. What I have a hard time with, it's like, hey, Wonder Woman's, I know they killed a lot of people, but then they have Wonder Woman go on this like whole mission to bring together the freedom fighters. Hey, you know what? I guess there's no one left. Let me pick up Uncle Sam, who's just fundamentally an awful character. And these people have no chance against these guys. And the reason why these guys are still around is because, Superman and Batman, they know they could wipe their ass with them to begin with, so they're not worth killing to begin with, right? So that's why they're still around.
Right. They took out the major, which was smart, right? It's not just that Superman and Batman were corrupted from an early age. It's that they took out all the possible conceivable opposition to them at the same time, which I like that. That's a very, because you would naturally ask the question, well, where the fuck was Flash? Where was Green Lantern? Where was Martian Manhunter when all this was happening? It's like, oh, they never got a chance to become heroes either. So,
and I hate
like
Uncle
that.
Sam Lantern. I hate him with the fucking ring. I hate that whole part. I hate the resurrection where the Lazarus pit and we get the freaking DC zombies. I hate that shit. I hate the whole like time travel stuff. Like and that's my fundamental problem with DC. Everything is a crisis. Everything is some kind of paradox, climax, whatever you want to call it.
Glad
I'm
you
so
used that
tired
term.
of it.
Yeah.
I'm so over DC storytelling, and Marvel has this problem too sometimes. I feel like they do that a lot with their Infinity junk. They both have fundamental problems with stories they tell, that they go back to the same trope over and over again. And I feel like every time I read a DC story, it goes back to the same thing over and over again. And with Batman, for me, I don't want my Batman stories involved in stuff like this. I want Batman to be Cataclysm. I want Batman to be Nightfall. I want Batman to be, like Hush. Batman for me is detective stories. Batman is not tropey time paradox stories where I'm jumping through time. Batman is one of my all-time favorite characters for DC. This is not my Batman story. And so, yes, I like where Batman went. I love that he got to experience his parents, and they probably could have done that without the time shifts. So that part of it I liked. But I didn't need all the tropey bullshit that led to that. And I wanted villains that mattered to me to get me to that. And I feel like this is a really big, disappointing story they could have told about Superman having absolute, control of the world. and they should have gone bigger and better. And I feel like they just put it in a 5-story trope when it could have been a much, much bigger story than they made it. That's where I'm at.
This could have been huge. Like, this made me think of...
This should have been like Death of Superman levels to me.
Right.
Why couldn't they have done like him and like Wonder Woman as like the evil mad couple that just rules?
Yes, Amazon. And so for me, Tim, this should have been Death of Superman levels event. Like, you know what I mean? Like, this could have been so big. It could have been a huge event, and they just put it in a freaking team up book that doesn't really matter. Like, this could have been a huge event for them, and I feel like they just shit the bed on it.
And having reversing Batman and Wonder Woman's roles in this would have made the story better for me.
I don't disagree at all, Andy. I 100%.
Well, I will say I like that Batman is swept up in this too. That it's not just
I get it.
It's not just a story of Superman gone bad, because I think we've seen that a lot, and we haven't seen too many. Well, what if Batman was equally corrupt?
But from a goddess kind of scenario, and Superman, like from a character standpoint, I get why Batman's in it because of what he means to the DC universe. But Wonder Woman and Superman, to Andy's point, I think makes more sense in the, I guess, grander scheme of it. I guess in terms of the powers, what their background is, etc. I guess for me.
Well, hell, I mean, I think if we're doing a rewrite of this, right, you could do all three. Take DC's Holy Trinity and say, what if you turn it on its ass, basically? And because I don't know, I just fundamentally I like the idea of, again, a Batman who is equally corrupt and isn't like. Because there's so many stories where it's like, oh, it's easy to see Superman as the bad guy, and Batman is just fundamentally good. But like, what if we say they're both just completely on the same page and being these fascist overlords, right? And I kind of wish we had seen more of that. Like, we really just get a glimpse of what that world looks like in that first issue, really. And
so, Tim, would it be too far?
There's more potential there.
That this comic is the Superman 4 version of the movie, like the Superman 4, or was it? Wait, no, what movie was it? Yeah, like he goes back. Was it that the movie he goes? What movie is it? He goes super bad.
Oh, Superman 3. Where
all right, so I'm saying so sorry. Yeah, so would it be too much to say that this comic version is Superman 3 Superman when it should have been bigger? To me.
Yeah, I mean the immediate comparison to me is something like an Age of Apocalypse, right? Which says you change this one pivotal event in history, and everything else, it's like stepping on a butterfly in the past or whatever, right? Like, it just, everything explodes outward from there. And I mean, that was a very sprawling storyline, given just tons and tons of tie-in issues, and it justified its own grandiosity, and I think this could have, this very easily could have been a big event in its own right. I mean, look what Marvel did with Secret Empire. Same thing with Captain America. They got a whole fucking line-wide event out of that, and that's just Captain America gone bad.
And I think ultimately that's what bugs me about the story is I think it should have gone bigger. And I think that's what bugs me, and the background behind it and the villains they used to get there. Like, there's just so much about it, but ultimately it should have been a bigger story than it was.
Yeah, I guess it would have been stepping on the heels of Infinite Crisis coming up. But I'll tell you what I did sort of think was clever is that what did we talk about? What's the purpose of this? The premise of this team up series is to see Batman and Superman on the same page, buddy again, working together, solving crime. So fighting mysteries and solving crime is the joke that I make. But and it's like, okay, you want that, be careful what you wish for, because we're going to give you that. We're going to give you not only Batman and Superman very much on the same page as partners, but as brothers. Like, that's the idea. The premise is they have been raised together to the point that they see these corrupt versions of the Legion as their parents, and look upon one another as siblings, really. And so that's how tight their bond is, and yet they are these fucking, like, twin Hitlers, as Green Arrow calls them. So it's one of those, again, there's something wrong with this world, even when we try to put things right, even when everything looks good on the outside, there's something really rotten at the core here. We can get these characters back on the same page, but boy, do we now regret doing that, because look at the world that it's created. So I definitely think there's something there. I'm such a mark for that kind of that little meta spark behind the creative side of it. And I'm really glad that Schiff brought that up, because I had forgotten how baked into the story just that meta element was of, oh, there's something wrong with the world, it's too dark, and this is something that not only readers and fans of the characters are saying, now the characters themselves are echoing as well. So we see that, and I see how, in retrospect, this reads like a precursor to Infinite Crisis. Because going into this, Schiff, when you said that it was kind of on that reading list, I would have been like, what's the connection to Infinite Crisis here? I don't see it. But thematically, I totally get it now. So I'm glad you pointed that out.
Yeah, and it's just one of those, like, one of those things where we didn't even mention this, but at the very end, we see that Superman and Batman have to make because one of the worlds they go to, it looks like Apocalypse, Darkseid's world, is there, but no, like Darkseid is rolling over Earth, and we see a later version of Superman has had to team up with them. They're like, we need to fix the timeline. And I'm not sure if this is brought up later in the run, Tim, but Superman because Batman had died, is no longer, he faded from existence where he shot Joe Chill himself.
Yep.
Superman has to make a deal with Darkseid to get a boom tube. And I'm not sure if that's ever brought up. Hell, knowing Grant Morrison, he probably pulled that for Final Crisis.
Oh, God, yeah, who knows?
Yeah, but, like, that's like a dangling thread at the end, because even, like, Superman's like, and Batman even's like, we don't know what Darkseid's gonna want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know if that ever got followed up on later in this series by Jeff Loeb, or just, again, like you said, it seems like something Morrison might have run with. So Sean used the term paradox to describe some of the plot contrivances here, and I want to make sure I at least somewhat grasp what happens here. Schiff, maybe you can help me out, because I do have some questions, right?
All right.
So, and this is a little bit, I mean, it's a paradox, but I think it's also clever in its own way. So because Batman and Superman go bad and turn the world into this fascist nightmare, that changes the course of history so dramatically that the Legion themselves are very different characters and themselves quite corrupt. And the reason that the Legion are corrupt is because Batman and Superman were corrupted in the past by these three members of the Legion. So it's like they're both self-fulfilling prophecies in a way at either ends of the timeline, and just eliminating that from ever happening makes that version of the Legion go away and also resets the timeline. Like, it's hard to even wrap your brain around, but I think one can't happen without the other, is what I'm saying, right? It's like a closed loop. I think is the idea at the end of this story, right? So
yeah, because we were having like the timeline just like fall on each other. That's what we were seeing at the very end, and we see those versions of like the Legion of Superheroes, like Saturn Queen, Lightning Lord, and Cosmic King, literally fade from existence.
Yes.
So like we wipe them out, because I guess when they went to the 31st century where they stopped this, we see that I guess that's where they had gotten like were able to steal like the time
bubble or whatever
bubble.
it was.
Yeah, because that's what Wonder Woman was going after to send them back in time, and that's when she kills Batman, and then Superman with the man bomb. They shot it off, and that's what killed that first timeline that we saw at the end of issue 2. And then when we go to the other timelines, it's just time. I'm honestly shocked that Rip Hunter didn't show up. He's the Time Lord.
Oh yeah, really?
But, yeah, he didn't show up in this. But
or somebody like Wave Rider, even from like the early '90s.
Well, they killed him in Time Crisis.
Oh, did they? Okay.
Yeah, I've read that as well. Like I said, I've been a busy boy. But we literally see them like fade from existence at the very end because like Lightning Man, Matter Eater Man, Saturn Woman,
Jesus Christ, man.
are there.
Are
there this?
Go on.
Yeah, the Legion of Superheroes with Brainiac 5. But they
and it's like they had to solve this. It wasn't enough just to preserve their own origins from being changed. They had to go back. They had to nip it in the bud at both ends of the timeline, right?
Yeah.
It was they could like prevent these corrupt legionnaires from changing history, but because those characters had already stepped out of time and were, behind the scenes in the time bubble, whatever, like you had to prevent them from ever even getting access to it in order to make it all go away.
It's like
okay, so I think I'm straight on that.
It's like an example.
It makes as much sense as any time travel thing does. Like I kind of just have to make my peace with it. But the part that I am sort of stuck on still is, and I think this, I don't know that this has really an explanation other than the story just needed it to happen, is so the timeline where Batman is now happy because the murder of his parents has been prevented. He never actually becomes Batman. He's just Bruce Wayne. So he remembers he's supposed to be Batman because Clark reveals that he's Superman and tells Bruce that he needs to try really, really hard to remember. And it's like, is that really enough to overcome the fact that your entire history has literally been rewritten from the point of origin? Like, I've encountered a lot of time travel stories, and I've never met one where it was like, no, you just need to remember really hard the way that things are supposed to be, and that's it, right? Like, I don't know that makes a lot of sense to get him there. I could be, now, if you told me that Superman just convinced him that this is not the way that history was supposed to play out, and he was meant for other things, and, needs to step up to the plate, I get it. But the fact that he just sort of exerts enough force of will to, reclaim his lost memories is just, I don't know. It's very like pulled out of thin air to me.
Yeah, it's like one of those things. Like I can see that. It's just one of those things where you're like comics. It's like he like shook him, like he looked Bruce in the eye and like shook him to like remember me, remember me.
Yeah, it shouldn't work that way, right? Like there's a lot more to it that he just doesn't remember. He's a completely different person, But anyway, yeah, this again, I think it would have worked really well as a video game, as one of those just sprawling, check in on a lot of characters, do a lot of side missions type video games that are sort of like what's the Spider-Man's Shattered Dimensions, right? Which I don't love as a Spider-Man game, but you take sort of that same concept for something like this, And I think it could work really well. Also, like Sean said, there's potential in this for this to be a much bigger story than it is. But, as 5 issues, it just sort of seems like an excuse to do a very character-focused type of look at Superman and Batman's relationship. And I think those parts of it are pretty effective, while also being just a fun tour of the DC universe where you can let somebody like an artist of the caliber of Carlos Pacheco really cut loose and draw all these crazy concepts and characters. I mean, the Blackhawks, that's, again, a whole other thing that it's just thrown in here, right? without much impact, but it gives Carlos Pacheco an excuse to draw that stuff. So, yeah, I mean, it's got its moments. I think some of the big moments are maybe lost on me because we had gotten to a point where this type of thing was pretty overdone in comics. Like at the time of, take it back to the original Infinity Gauntlet story where Thanos kills in pretty creative and brutal fashion, like all of the heroes. That packed a punch in 1991, right? That was the type of thing you'd never really seen before in comics. And more often we saw those types of stories where it was like, okay, we're going to go to extremes and give you these really awesome, these really arresting visuals, but at the end of the day, we're going to walk it all back. It's all going to be an imaginary story. It's all going to be wiped away. We're going to reset things. And, you go to that well enough times and it stops having any sort of effect. So I think that's sort of where I was at with this one. So things like, Superman strangling Wonder Woman with her own lasso, that should hit me a lot harder than it does, but it's just, I don't know, it feels a little been there, done that, seen it before, whatever.
And by the way, it's also right on the coattails. I mean, you got to remember Avengers Disassemble kind of just did a similar shit at this point.
Yeah, well, right? Big reason I don't give a shit about Avengers Disassembled, too.
Yeah, because, you had Jack of Hearts died, and they blew up, Scott Lang is killed, and, and then...
She-Hulk goes crazy and tears Vision in half.
Yeah,
it's just one nightmarish thing after another, and it kind of washes over you.
And then one thing I'll add about this, the kills in this, as cool as they are, they're just sudden and don't really impact too much. It's like, okay, they killed that one. Wonder Woman's dead. Okay, Green Arrow, they killed Green Arrow. Hey, they killed. It's just, they really didn't have any meaning, and they did it all in like 5 issues. It's just like boom, 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 done, move on, and then I don't know. It's just, there's a lot going on.
liberal use of heat vision in this by Superman, just flash frying people. Which I mean, that in and of itself is like a whoa. That tells you you're dealing with a much different Superman, obviously. But yeah, it does sort of.
But I do feel like you, as a lifelong Superman fan, and I'm not a Superman comic fan, but I feel like a big story around Superman and having that absolute power for me would have totally brought me back to the fold on Superman, and I feel for you it would have been a big deal too. So,
if you guys want to check out a Superman story where he has absolute power, I would suggest checking out the Injustice comics that they released as tie-ins to the video game, but they did 5 years beforehand, and you see like the build-up of what caused the fracture of Superman and Batman, and it's a really good. It's all of them are on the DC app.
I'll get to that in 20 years because I just read this. So
okay.
Well, I mean, there's also Scott or Andy, I think, mentioned it. Superman Red Son, which is again, what if Superman was not raised by the Kents but by
in Mother Russia, right? He's communist.
Hey, I am way open. I am looking for a quintessential Superman story still for me to get into Superman. I am open to whatever you guys tell me. I will read it. So
I mean, there's a lot out there. Whether you're interested in examples of just good boilerplate Superman doing what Superman does type stories, or you just want Superman as Homelander type stories. There's a hell of a lot of those out there too. But nothing.
I just want a good Superman story for me to get involved and see. Like for me, Tim, it'd be like, hey, Tim, you love Superman. He's one of your favorite characters. I want that Superman story to bring me into that fold. And we don't have to talk about it right now, but that's what I'm looking for. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, maybe next time I'm on deck here with a pick. I go with a lesser known Superman story that,
because I feel like
really
Andy needs it after this one too. So
we'll see.
No offense, Chef. I'm sorry. So
I will say that I kind of had a longer spiel prepared about Uncle Sam and how much I hate that character. I just hate what that character. So, and again, not to get into it, but like, so from what I understand, again, I had to go to Wikipedia because I'm like, all right, I need some help here. Uncle Sam is a real character, originated not with DC, but with. So he was created by Will Eisner, which is embarrassing.
Yes.
Like the Eisner Award? That Eisner?
Yes.
Yes, correct.
In the fucking 40s. So created in 1940 for Quality Comics by writer-artist Will Eisner. He's kind of like a Ghost Rider, but for... so instead of being powered by the awesome fury of Satanic Vengeance, which is the original version of Ghost Rider, he's powered by the awesome fury of people's rah-rah patriotism for the United States specifically. Like, it... Why would this be a thing, right? Like, why is that something that...
Well, it was created in the 40s. You got to think.
Well, yeah, the real answer is because it was World War II propaganda, right? Yeah. Just like all of these creations during Captain America, same story. But I mean, at least Captain America is a dude, right? He's a human being who can, question his own creation and existence and belief system and sort of like, you can use him as a vehicle for that kind of storytelling. Whereas like Uncle Sam only exists to be like, America, fuck yeah. Like, there's nothing there. There's just nothing there beyond just blind patriotism. And so I was going to have a whole thing about how shitty a character that is, but the fact is he just doesn't play as enough of a role in this story to even justify getting into it. And so that was another thing. Like, I thought that this story was setting up to be one thing, because again, we've only got 5 issues, right? And every time it starts to look like, okay, here's our story, they swerve you, like, I thought this was going to be the story of, all right, Superman and Batman are corrupt, all the other heroes are dead, and Wonder Woman now has to recruit these fucking D-listers as our opposition. Like, there's a story in that, right? Like, as much as I may not like the concept of Uncle Sam, there's a story to be told in, like, the crappiest superheroes of all time being whipped into shape by Wonder Woman to take down Batman and Superman. Like, I could kind of rock with that. But by the end of that second issue, it's like, nope, not doing that. We killed all them too. So, I have mixed feelings about that. It's, maybe if this could have stuck to one focus, I could see it playing out in 5 issues without it feeling so, like, ADD all over the place. But anyway, I think I've said my piece on this. Andy, do you have anything else?
No. You guys have said all that. I mean, like I said, I will definitely do a reread just to kind of, have a more, kind of taking what you guys have all said into it. And yeah, it was, I mean, there were plenty of positives. It's just, for me, it was just super, I think, a little advanced for me. and hard to follow, and I, and buying in was a little hard for me.
Yeah, it's one you might want to come back to in a few years to see if your thoughts may be exactly the same. Honestly, like it. Sean and I both struggled with it to some extent, even with our supposed advanced comics knowledge and degrees. But yeah, I could see how this is a bit over your head as someone who has read a grand total of 2 comic storylines now, right? Sean, anything else from you on this one?
No, listen, I appreciate the art of the book. It was really well done. Story-wise, it could have been much bigger and much better for me, and I appreciate Schiff picking something that at least in theory could have been good or should have been good. And I didn't shit on it too much, Schiff. I know I typically leave in a lot on DC and shitting on DC Comics. I don't think I did too badly tonight, but it just wasn't my cup of tea, and I thought it should have been better. That's all I'll say.
No, actually, I thought it was going to be a whole lot worse with you shitting on it. To be honest, but like you had said before, I can see you guys' complaints, especially Andy's. My bad.
No, it's fine.
I don't say why you say my bad. You like what you like, and you enjoy it.
No, I was saying
I'm here to read. I'm here to learn. I'm here.
Yeah.
If it's something that is a little, further out of my realm, that's fine. I'll catch up. And that's part of it is you guys pointing out things and making it easier for me to do that read, and understand it more, and then kind of come back. Okay. Yeah, so don't ever apologize.
No, I was just saying my bad because I threw you in the 300 course when you're still in English 101.
It's okay.
But no, it just, I don't know, some stories I'll read and I'll be like, this is a slog to get through. But I was just with this, it spoke to me. I remember, Tim, I call you and Sean my comic book czars, as I'm hey, what should I read next type deal. And I remember running a little kid, oh my God, I found this great one. I'm glad we were able to finally bring it for the podcast. Sean, I really do wish it would be more like a big Secret War thing, Tim was talking about, and I do wish it was a video game. So right. If DC is listening, James Gunn, I'll make sure to tweet at you. But it was very good. Sean jokingly says, maybe not jokingly, that I love everything. That's true to an extent, but y'all did make me read Capwolf. So, yeah. But no, it was I just thought, and the covers were amazing. We didn't talk about those. The covers were top notch.
Yeah, I was encompassing the art with the covers.
Okay, yeah,
basically, yeah.
Yeah, but no, I could see the barrier to entry, because to be honest, with the bad guys, I thought they were just made up for the story, Tim, until you were yeah, they were actual real people. Just because I just thought the story was about Batman and Superman, and everyone else besides the other Justice Leaguers were ancillary characters.
Schiff, you can at least admit the bad guys are a complete butt, right?
Oh, they are. That's what I said.
Okay. All right. Okay. I feel better about that. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
No, they might be my Mount Rushmore best DC villains after this.
Okay, great.
You can listen to that here on the Pop station.
That's right.
Soft plug.
Yes, it is. And beyond that, I guess we will let you know that if you would like to read this 5-issue storyline, you can do so on the DC Unlimited or Unlimited Infinite, right? That's what it's called.
Infinite, yeah.
Yeah, Infinite
app. There's both a hardcover and a softcover trade paperback. Those are probably out of print, I would have to imagine by now.
I found one on Amazon for $15.
Well, there you go. So still can be gotten pretty cheaply, it sounds like. And there's actually you know what? More contemporary, right up my alley. There's a Batman Superman omnibus.
Oh boy.
Having them omnibuses.
So collecting. How many issues did this Batman Superman series go? Let's see. This lasted 87.
Oh my!
I don't think Jeff Loeb writes for all 87.
No, I'm sure he does not. No.
Doesn't he go
was
on
at
to
the
be
peak
he's
of
on
his
Marvel?
powers.
He's on Marvel TV. He was like head of Marvel TV at one point. So that was after this, right?
Yeah, he bounces. Doesn't he? Or am I thinking of?
I think he's in
Red
charge
Rucka.
when all the Netflix Marvel stuff is going on.
Yeah, he's in charge.
Yeah, he definitely was by then. He was in charge of like Marvel TV with Agents of Shield. So that's
correct.
I remember his name.
2013. But I think he left. Oh dear. So he left DC
He left recently.
around.
It wasn't that long ago. Yeah. Marvel.
He left DC a long time ago, but he's been with Marvel in some capacity for the past several years. He around the start of Infinite Crisis ended up going back to Marvel and wrote a dreadful Wolverine story, like one of the all-time bad stories ever for Wolverine.
Which one was that?
It was like it was called. I can't remember what it was, but it involved. It was kind of like Capwolf.
Oh God! Oh no!
It took all of the wolf themed characters, not even wolf, dog, cat, Sasquatch, whatever characters, and decided they're all like part of this weird tribe. They're all connected somehow. It did. There's this character called Romulus. Yeah. Oh my God, it was so fucking bad. That was when he really had lost his fastball. Like Jeff Loeb at the time of this story we just talked about, this is peak of his powers. Like, and he's already done.
Oh, is it Evolution? No, it's not Evolution, right?
It's a
I don't
mystery.
think that's.
No,
I don't think
Wolverine.
that's what it's
That's
called.
Wolverine and Sabretooth, so that's not that one.
Well, Sabretooth was involved in this, so I mean, I don't think that's what it was called, but
Okay.
Anyway, Loeb had done like the color, what they called the color books, Daredevil Yellow and Spider-Man Blue, Hulk Gray was one of those are all really good, by the way. And like he had done pretty much all those by the time of the Superman Batman story. But man, when he lost his fastball, he really lost it. So I think it's for the best that he stopped writing comics and went back into the TV production side of things. Hopefully he was happier there. Hopefully it was a better fit because wow, did he lose it I don't know, like maybe he's just better as a DC writer than a Marvel writer, but oof, it was his later Marvel stuff was dreadful.
Hey Tim, I found it. Romulus, the leader of the Lupines. Is that what they're
called?
Yeah, okay, I found it.
Yeah.
I got it. All right.
It's god awful.
Yep, I found it. Romulus. Wow. Okay, that's a whole separate thing. I might have to check that out one day.
That was like in 2007, I want to say. But,
got it.
Yeah, actually, Jeff Loeb just lasted to issue 26, so this was coming to an end when this ran.
So we're reaching the end of his run. Yep.
Awesome.
So yeah. All right. Well, I think that about. Ooh, okay, and yeah, that issue was the tribute to his son. So his son actually wrote the issue and had passed away at this point. So it's like an artist jam issue. It's like a whole bunch of artists to get this book out that in this story that his son had written. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah.
Looking at that, looks like his son passed away in 2005, and yeah.
Mm. So on that note, on that sad note, we will bid you adieu until next time. I'm not sure whose pick it will be or what story we're going to cover, but we'll see about doing a third episode. Like, let's at least get to 3. If we can do 3, then that's a 3-issue miniseries, you guys. Even if we don't do any more, that's good enough, right? No.
I enjoyed this one. Even though I didn't enjoy the story, I enjoyed talking it out. I truly enjoyed it, and I enjoyed everyone's point of view. So good job. Well, and you do a great job leading it, Tim. So I think we'll be good. I think we'll continue.
All right. Well, we'll do our best at least. How about that?
Yep.
All right. Any other podcasts or social media that you would like to plug, Sean?
No. Well, yeah, you can 7 Months of Danger on the No-So feed, where we go through the timeline of the Dangerous Alliance. We are at the halfway point of that miniseries pod, so please give that one a listen. I do that with Scott, Logan, and Matt Souza, so give that one a listen on No-So.
All right, very good. Scott, any other podcasts for you, sir?
Yeah, YouTube Roulette, the Danger Pod that Sean mentioned, and that can be found on Twitter at Scott_Shiflet until I'm probably banned.
Again? Very good. Andy, take us home, sir.
All right, so check out my newest show on the Wrestling Network that is with Logan Crosland, where it's called Who's Next, where we cover current day NXT. Our next episode, actually, we're moving it up slightly so we could talk about Deadline and the NXT show immediately thereafter. So that is a lot of fun. I really am enjoying it. I'm enjoying doing the show with Logan. We have, are messaging all throughout when NXT is on and kind of prepping. So it's a lot of fun with, doing a wrestling show that it's never going to, I don't think it's going to get stale because of the turnover and how we're going to see people develop. So I really like that. Over here on this very pop experience, check out every weekday the Video Jukebox Song of the Day. It's, mostly the same, a few people, but we're trying to get some special appearances here and there. Lots of fun theme weeks. And check out my regular rotation of shows, including Laughing Theater, Blockbuster Rewatch. Cartoons of Our Youth will come eventually at some point. Year and Pop will be back at some point. And yeah, lots of fun stuff. And over on Stream Lounge, follow me under Laughing Theater and Blockbuster Rewatch as I go through. I'm finishing up the MCU and getting caught up. I'll be doing some other blockbusters before getting into the Skywalker saga. And under Laughing Theater, I am currently doing the Pixar films, and I am up to the movie Up. And also, now that Peacock is on there, we've done one wrestling stream, but coming up in January with the Royal Rumble coming at the end of the month, expect to see, at least a few Royal Rumble streams, probably most likely on Saturday and Sunday nights coming up. I know the Podfather has 2 that he's going to do. If you know who his favorite wrestler is, you're going to know which 2 years that he's going to be doing on those. And as for me, I'm probably just going to say, who wants to watch a Rumble on Stream Lounge on a Saturday and come hang out and do a fun group watch? And that's really what it is. It's a lot of fun, and those will drop as pods. I believe the working title is Streaming the Classics. So check that out on the Wrestling Network.
Very good. A lot of great content out there for everybody. And until you hear from us again, this has been Traders of the Lost Arks. For Andy Atherton, for Sean Kidd, for Scott Shiflet, I'm Tim Capel. We will talk to you next time. Later.